Hello everybody and welcome to this lecture. In this lecture we're going to be covering the course roadmap. To start us off, I wanted to explain a little bit on the structure. Essentially, this course was designed to follow the official AWS Cloud Practitioner Exam guide. In this course, I'm going to try to stay to the point and try to help you identify exactly what you need and not go on too many tangents. AWS offers a lot of services. The first thing you're going to realize is that they cover so many different technologies. It's not just cloud-based stuff. Everything does run through the cloud, but doesn't mean that everything that they do is essentially your data backup or compute services. Some of it is very niche. Things like Deep Racer or some of their artificial intelligence stuff, they just have so many different services. We're not going to be going into any of that in this course. That is a very niche topic. In this course, we want to stay very high level, and that is what the Cloud Practitioner is all about. It is to help you understand the general services, things that you will more than likely be using no matter where you are, and just try to keep it from a high level perspective. That way you understand what the courses, that way you understand what the services do and kind of how they work together and how they work with your existing infrastructure. As I mentioned before, this course is going to cover every service that you will need to know in order to pass the Certified Cloud Practitioner Exam. So starting off, this is actually the very first chapter that contains any content. It's actually chapter 2. So chapter 2 is the Cloud Concepts domain. And when I say domain, what I mean is if you were to go to the Amazon webpage for the Cloud Practitioner and you pulled up the official exam guide, you'll see that there are some domains that are covered in the exam. The very first domain is the Cloud Concepts. And within that, these are the main points that we're going to be focusing on. So basically, we want to understand the basics to AWS Cloud Computing. And then we want to talk about the global cloud infrastructure. We're going to be discussing the advantages of cloud computing and then reviewing the white paper for the well-architected framework. In chapter 3, we're going to be talking about the AWS security concepts. Now, there isn't a whole lot to cover for this exam. However, the things I did want to cover were the shared responsibility model, which is actually not just with AWS. It can be used with other cloud platforms as well. But basically what that's going to talk about is on each different level, your IaaS, your PaaS, and your SaaS, what are you responsible for? And don't worry if you don't understand what I'm talking about, if that just sounds like a bunch of gibberish to you right now. In the later lectures, you will learn a little bit more about what that is, and what I'm talking about now will make sense. So no need to worry about that. Then we're going to be talking about cloud security and compliance. We're going to be moving on to AWS WAF and AWS Shield. You'll get to learn about that. And then we're going to discuss AWS Inspector and AWS Trusted Advisor. Once again, don't worry if none of this makes sense to you. We will be covering that throughout this course. In chapter 4, we're going to be focusing on AWS Services and Technology. Now, just forewarning, chapter 4 is where the bulk of your exam is going to be focused on. These are just your basic services, and for the exam, you only need to understand these at a high-level overview. Basically, you need to be able to identify what the services are by name and have a pretty decent understanding of what they do. But aside from that, you're not going to need to know too much of the technical knowledge in order to become certified. We're going to start off with AWS storage. That's going to include what an S3 bucket is, what an EBS volume is, what an EFS volume is. We're going to start in a lab, so you'll get to play around with S3 and at least get an insider view of what S3 is and how it works. Then we're going to move over to AWS IAM, and we're going to perform a lab. Basically, that's just going to be setup and configuration so that you understand how that works and a little bit more information on how IAM works as a whole. After that, we're going to jump into AWS Compute Services, which is a huge component for AWS Cloud. We're going to be talking about EC2, Lambda, ECS, Elastic Beanstalk, and auto scaling. Some of these subjects may not be covered as heavily as others in the exam, but just to be safe, I wanted to throw them in there. That way, in case you get 1 or 2 questions that talk about Elastic Beanstalk or auto scaling, you should be able to identify what that is and be able to weed out the wrong answers and focus on narrowing in on the right answers. In Chapter 5, we're going to be discussing billing and pricing. Now, this topic is going to cover a decent portion of your exam. Basically, AWS wants you to understand how the pricing model works and just have a good, decent idea of how you can better improve your architecture without breaking your bank account. So we're going to be talking about an overview of the AWS pricing. There's actually a white paper for that. And then we're going to review the pricing policies. You're going to understand the fundamentals on pricing. We're going to review some free services. There is actually a free tier for AWS. So we're going to review what is included in that. Then we're going to be discussing some of the service-focused pricing, like compute, storage, databasing, networking, and then following that up with the support plan. So if you need help with an AWS situation, you can actually purchase a support plan, and there are certain services that are offered within that. We'll go into more detail when we get to that point. After that, we're going to discuss organizations and consolidated billing, and we're going to wrap it up with AWS calculators. All right, everybody, that about wraps up this lecture. Let's go ahead and dive into the next one, where we're actually going to start talking about the basics of AWS cloud computing. All right, I can't wait. I'll see you in there.